We are being slowly digested by the stomach acids of entertainment, and we do not even know it. Almost every single person I know my age is under the spell. I believe in 20 years, my generation will look back on this time with regret and sadness. We will realize we have wasted years of our lives staring at a screen, years we will never get back. God have mercy on us.
I'm Todd, and I was naughty. I did everything wrong. I got kicked out of art school, I drank heavily, and I looked to other religions and versions of spirituality to get fulfilled. The problem was, I was in the occult and I didn't even know it. My life was a wreck, and I had to learn what it meant to have a relationship with Jesus.
And I'm Laura. I was super nice. I did everything right. I got saved young, went to Moody Bible Institute, got married, and followed the Christian rules to having a good life. Problem was, that formula didn't work. I had to change how I related with Jesus.
At the end of the day, what I learned is the very simple truth. Jesus is the answer, and the only one that will ever actually fulfill you.
Naughty versus nice.
And welcome back to Naughty versus Nice. Of course, I'm your co-host, Todd.
And I'm the better host, Laura.
Oh,
And I'm the best producer, Kelly.
I guess we're doing it all the way around. So we have a guest, not in studio. They're calling in, and we're using fancy internet technologies in order to do this. And I just kind of want to set this up just a little bit. You know, Kelly and Laura ended up this year and the year before. There's a woman in leadership kind of conference that happens at Moody every single year. And there are a number of different speakers and talking on a wide range of topics. And our guest today, this is Dr. Rosalie de Rosset. She gave one of the lectures there and was talking about the nature of technology and how technology has kind of changed just kind of everything, I guess you could really say, especially at least from a Christian point of view. And so we have her on phone with us. Doctor, are you with us?
Here.
Thank you very much for joining us. Now, Doctor, we have a bio. I just want to go ahead and read this real quick for you. She is a professor, a writer, and a literary voice who spent over 50 years teaching students how to think deeply in a world that increasingly refuses to do so. With a very fierce love for language and a sharp eye for cultural drift, she has long warned that technology isn't just for changing how we communicate, that it's dulling how we reason, how we create, and how we imagine. Today, we're asking her, what have we traded away as a society in our rush to stay connected? So that's kind of the overall theme today. And I guess we'll kind of, move.
Well, I would just like to say I had Dr. de Rosset for a class at Moody many years ago. I'm sure I'm not memorable. I think it was one class. It was Christ in the Novel. I love it. I still talk to people about Babette's Feast because I remember watching that. But yeah, I loved the class, and I just always had a lot of admiration for you. And of course, I still hear good things through Dr. Pam McRae, just different things that you're doing and the books, everything. So I'm just excited that we get to touch base and tie things back together to Moody.
Dr. Rosset, you might remember her. Laura probably sat upright in the front row, probably had one popped collar and the other one down because it was the 90s and we did two collars back then.
I was not in the front row, Todd. I was I'm an introvert. I don't want people looking at me, but I was in the back. And I think actually I couldn't find it because I saved it because you wrote good comments on it. I had written a paper about being a woman in the church and feeling as if there's such a strong male voice that, the predominantly male authors in scripture and all of that.
Right.
And that I had described that Jesus could feel like a statue who had a paper heart hung on him. It was so hard to relate sometimes as a woman to him. And you had made a comment on the paper, and so I felt so good about it. I saved it. This is
well, that's a wonderful comment.
I know. We're like 28 years out, and I'm like, here's this. My kids are like rolling their eyes. We don't care, Mom. But it was really, it meant a lot to me. And anyway,
that's wonderful. You'll have to tell me later what your maiden name was.
Oh, okay. And I think we put that out there, don't we?
Have we?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It's a Tucker.
That is very familiar to me because of the KK.
Yeah, 2Ks. Yeah, so it's a strange one.
Yeah.
And I was the best student.
She's beaming right now, just absolutely beaming.
I also came up with the questions. So when you liked the questions, I was hair flipping in the studio. I was doing a lot of that.
See, if I had any of my old professors on, they would know immediately who I was, and it would start with a sucking in sound before they had anything. It would be more like that.
Well, we do have our questions.
Yes.
I just handed them to me, so I think I'm in charge of at least the first one. You've seen several generations come through Moody, including my generation. How has the presence of technology in the classroom changed since then, and what does that shift look like from your perspective?
Oh my goodness, it's such a huge question. In fact, I just gave a little lecture on my whole perspective of technology, having started with handwriting in high school and only moving to a typewriter at college. When I started teaching was 1971, I'm 22 years old, and I'm in my 57th year now. So that's an enormous sweep of time.
Yeah.
So basically, there was no technology. Well, of course there was. It was called the pencil, the pen, and the royal typewriter, the kind that if you could have lifted as a weapon, which then moved to the electric typewriter, then moved to the electric, which was practically an act of God, where it had that little burst of white that you could go reverse the key and it would puff it on that. I did all my degrees, my master's, my MDiv, and part of my PhD without computer, and got an Apple IIc that had the true floppy, you know what I mean? You had to reboot it after 20 pages. It was a natural environment. I'm not going to idealize, but it was better. Students talked to each other, and they were out on the plaza playing their guitars, and they were creating, and they were connecting through all kinds of physical means, and they weren't attached to anything. I mean, I have a quote here by a student that says, in one of the responses to the media fact, we are being slowly digested by the stomach acids of entertainment, and we do not even know it. Almost every single person I know my age is under the spell. I believe in 20 years, my generation will look back on this time with regret and sadness. We will realize we have wasted years of our lives staring at a screen, years we will never get back. God have mercy on us. That's a student quote. And so when I look at the classroom, it was interactive. They were playful. They were fun. They looked you in the eye. When you got on the elevator, people talked to you. Nobody talked to you. They used their earbuds and their earphones as an excuse to avoid you. I just ranted about this forever in Images of Christ in the novel. I only teach one class now, but I'm teaching it this semester. And so they wrote, they communicated. They didn't do abbreviations all the time. I'm not going to tell you that we didn't have terrible writers back then or terrible grammar, but I am going to tell you that today it has created a lethargy. A student will not turn something in and won't even make an excuse for it. There's a lack. I give her an essay to read. We do a whole unit on something called acedia, which is the name for sloth, one of the great cardinal sins. And sloth is not wanting what's best. We've resorted to a kind of meh existence, whatever existence. You don't push for the better thing. You accept the best because what's taking your time is indirect entertainment. They talk in the class about how they may not eat together because they go back to their room to relax and watch movies. So it has affected relationship. I finally realized 2 years ago, I think maybe it was less than that. Of course, I have a no phone policy in the classroom, no computers, no nothing, unless the person has some kind of special needs that they have to have it. But that I finally realized that I was still allowing them to come into the classroom with their phones, and then they would take them out the minute they thought I was concluding. So now I say, don't bring that phone in through the door, away and put away, off. When you come in, or I'll be very irritated, and you know how lovely I am when I'm irritated. And then you don't take it out and get out. I don't want to see any phones. Well, what's happened is that now we have conversation in the classroom. People talk before I get there. They talk until the roll is taken, and they talk to the end, and they pay attention to the end. So, I mean, since you asked just about the classroom has changed profoundly. I teach a whole third less than I can't teach as much. Mm. I can't require as much. Sometimes I push to do it. It was particularly true in English when I was teaching English, but you just can't get as much work out of the student. You have to pace yourself more slowly. I still push pretty hard to do it, but the concentration has been weakened so badly, and there is such a casualizing of academics, and you've got plenty of teachers that make concessions. And sometimes I've caught myself starting to be weird of having to accommodate so much. And I pulled back, and I just told them, there are younger teachers, feel free to drop. I said, but I'm not messing around.
That makes me think of something, I want to piggyback on something you just said, Doc, is that I worked at a restaurant a number of years ago. I've kind of on off and done this kind of thing. And we had one of the employees that was there. It was a young boy. He's 18, 17, somewhere around there. And one of the women that I worked with was talking about, wow, what an amazing job he does. He's so incredible. But if he was her son, she would be so proud. And I said, okay, what, I like the kid. And I was like, what about him makes him so, stand out? You're like, what's so amazing? He shows up on time. He does his job. He doesn't complain, and he doesn't steal. And I said, so he does all the stuff he's supposed to do. And that is now what we're celebrating. It's like we're celebrating mediocrity is what it is. And it's like, the old joke. Yeah, why don't we all stand around and applaud a Ford Focus? You know what I mean? It's like that kind of joke. It's the idea that somehow just when we give it our meh, we should all at least have people pat us all on the back and tell us how great we are. And, to kind of hit another point that you were talking about having the kids in the class and all of a sudden they're talking, all of a sudden they're interacting. When Kelly and I were doing youth group, we had a no cell phone policy, and the youth group has had it forever. We played these things called card games, and we told these things called jokes, and we had these things called social interactions. Completely changed the dynamic of what was going on within the social interaction and help kind of get them out of their shells a little bit more and get a little bit more comfortable with the idea that you don't always have to be perfect in order to still be enjoyed.
Right. And I honor you for doing that. I just did a program with Chris Fabry on the way somebody needs to go back on sacred space and what the technology sense of sacred space. I'm looking for more preachers that say we're going to preach out of a physical book. We are going to out of Bible, and I'm going to suggest that all of you have that, and I'm going to suggest that all of you put your cell phones away and that you not be distracting other people. I mean, even in a liturgical church, you see people texting during communion. There ought to be a special place in Dante's hell for that.
How would that have gone at the Last Supper? Jesus is like, hey, Judas, can you put that thing down? I'm doing something over here.
Sorry. I mean, if we are not thinking it through, and preachers are not following appropriate leads for this, and it can be done. And I've got to tell you that it has not kids out of my classroom. I mean, I'm sure it has, but I don't have 5 people in classroom, and I have a full classroom. And I think that they find out something. If there's anything that technology has changed, it's the poetry and the sensuality of life. We have become almost senseless. We are not out using our senses anymore. All we do is look down. We don't smell. We don't hear. We don't look. I said to them, put it down and listen to the natural of life, which is something that in their responses they have said, I heard the birds tweeter. You hear all these awful things in the city too, but so you hear. And you think of that Psalm, maybe 115, that says that they have ears, but they do not hear. They have idols. They have idols made out of, gold and silver. They don't have real life. And I want them to discover again the poetry of life. I mean, in the book I'm trying to write and will probably be writing when on the edge of my grave, I talk about what it's done to romance, what it's done to marriage, what kids say. I just wrote the chapter. What kids say about the effects on marriage, how they go to bed scrolling. They don't play games anymore. In the car, they don't talk to each other. So as soon as the cell phone was gone, they began to, he thought how cute, this one student said, I remembered how cute my wife was when she's kind of bebopping to the music on the radio, and we played board games and we did all these things and rediscovered each other. And romance, it makes people too close too soon. I mean, I tell my girls, you ought to be embarrassed if you ever text a boy first. And I tell the men, if you allow texting as a primary motif of your romance, it's not very romantic.
Well, we got kids breaking up with each other over text now.
that was a rule. And I had 3 boys. They're all pretty much grown now. And my rule was if you cannot sit across the table from a girl or a woman and tell her that you do not wish to continue this relationship, you can't be in it in the first place. So if you're going to date a girl, you better be ready. I'm going to make you sit down at the table and break up with her in person. You're not allowed to.
Bless you for that.
I was a mean mom.
No, you were a wonderful mom, and they will honor you later. Exactly. I mean, the texture of these things, and girls are as complicit. It makes them too aggressive. They give away the ship. And I said, be a little mysterious. And I talked to them about the high school experience where you had nothing and you kind of waited around a corner by a locker to kind of get the glimpse, But there was so much more anticipation it was heightened. And one of my students, when she gave up the phone, her boyfriend was coming to see her, and she said, he couldn't text and say, I'll be there in 13 minutes. What's this business about telling people you'll be there in 9.5 minutes? Like, I care? Come when you talk, unless you're going to be really nice. She said it was so exciting because she went out to the porch to watch him walk up the walk. And that's the poetry of living. We're sacrificing all the time.
Something else I noticed with my kids that they didn't learn, well, I made them at times learn it, but just by the state of the culture where we're at right now, is when I was in middle school and my friends hadn't arrived to the rec night yet, and I had to stand by the door and I had nothing to do. You had to learn to cope with feeling uncomfortable and just experiencing it. Whereas I think before my kids were allowed to have any kind of like internet or whatever, they would just have a basic phone, but they would pretend they were looking at the phone in order to look like they weren't standing there awkwardly. And I was like, we didn't have that. There's certain coping mechanisms that don't come into play.
But it made you grow up and with discomfort and embarrassment, all the other things. That's exactly right.
Well, speaking of relating and being embarrassing, I'm not joking when I say this. About a week and a half ago, I know what you're talking about. I ended up going to the bathroom, didn't bring my phone. Now I'm looking around wondering if I have a Popular Mechanics or a Reader's Digest or something like that. Like it was, 1996. I don't have a magazine rack in the bathroom. I didn't have anything. I just sat there. I'm like, what am I supposed to do now?
Did you listen for the birds?
I probably should have, But I remember sitting there distinctly going, it's like it's 1986 again,
And I just heard that ad about the guy that dropped his phone into the toilet.
Well, there's right. There's something you hit on here, and one of the dynamics that we do within the show, I was very naughty. I was involved in the occult, and I didn't know it. And that's kind of the catchphrase that I use for this. Whereas Laura kind of, did everything right, the proper Christian way. And we both came to the conclusion that our lives were complete wrecks for completely different reasons. And what has put everything in its proper place is, of course, Jesus. And within the occult, there's this concept of the golem. Are you familiar with this concept at all?
Yes. Yeah.
When you were talking about the kids being zombies and the kids walking around with their heads down and like they're empty inside, the concept of the golem is, for those that don't know, it's this clay figure that's humanoid in appearance. It has no will of its own until the sorcerer puts instructions upon a slip of paper, either puts it in the mouth of the golem or inside the empty head of the golem. Then it becomes this animated thing. It gives the appearance and the illusion of life, the appearance and illusion of choice. But in fact, there's nothing inside of it. It is hollow. And if we look at the idea of what cell phones have done, especially with people hunched over, their neck out, their head down, walking zombie-like, it makes me think of the concept of the golem. We've gone full circle, as they say.
That is very interesting. Is it a Jewish kind of motif? You see it in Judaism?
Yeah.
Wow, that is really interesting. That makes a good illustration in a talk on technology. So thank you. I owe you.
There we go. All right. And I didn't even graduate college.
That's right. You didn't go to Moody. I hinted at it earlier that there's a fast that you do. And I know you mentioned it during your lecture that Kelly and I attended. Can you talk a little bit about that, like what you're requiring of the students in regards to asking them to give up some of the phone and that kind of thing?
In 2009, I think it really hit me. It was right after the smartphone, I think, added to the full. And I never had a smartphone until many, many years later. I don't think I ever texted until 2016. I began to realize there was a problem. I was a little slow on the draw. Somebody in my classroom had a computer, and somebody came up and said, he's not taking notes, and he's playing games. And that was the end of that. I put a swift stop to computers in the classroom. But I began to realize there was something really serious going on, and all my freshmen, and this is unbelievable that they did it, to do a 4.5-day fast. And that was my very first, and then they were to write responses to it, which became a paper and to the fast. Well, I wasn't even as sophisticated about what I asked for then as what I asked for now. I asked for much, much more now. But I began to do that, and I began to collect those. I have 300 pages of this from the last 15, 16 years. Then I quit teaching English somewhere along the line, and I got 2 or 3 talks out of that. But I taught literature, of course. So I began with a 24-hour fast for all my classes, and then I changed it to a 48, and now I do 2 48 fasts, beginning and end. And they can't talk to anybody on their cell phone unless it's husband or wife, and there has to be sparing. They have to let their family know not to get a hold of them. You can't believe the struggle that goes on. Parents need to spot out of their kids' lives and let them have life. Do they have no friends of their own? They can't listen to one of the big rubs, and I think the longest chapter in my book will be on music, is no music and no games, of course, nothing, absolutely no technology except for not even texting to let friends know, which is a big problem because that's the only way they do it. No technology at all except that was homework related. And then they could ask me special permission if they had to. Now, Moody Chapel very sadly asked them to check in to chapel on their phone, and it's really too bad that's true. But they can't do anything, and it's about 7 or 8 rules. And honestly, it has been unbelievable. I can't exaggerate it enough. I mean, just to give you an example of a metaphor, it has slithered into this is a student verbiage. It has slithered into our lives like a python, slowly squeezing its prey to death. It has humanity wrapped in its coils and is steadily checking the wind out of our pipe. It goes on and on. They talk about how they're so upset with me, and I've never lost a bit of sleep over that. Then they talk about their boredom. They don't know what to do in all that scrolling time. They miss music terribly because it runs their lives. They talk about music being the soundtrack of their lives, and they use music to make a spiritual mood. They don't develop one on their own. The Lord doesn't do it. The music does it to do all the moods, to avoid things. So then by the second day, they feel a little bit of cleaned outness. And almost everybody goes in saying, I'm not an addict, and they almost all come out, maybe 90% come out saying I'm an addict. And it's like a phantom limb in my pocket. I don't know what to do without it. I don't know what to do in the boredom times. I don't know what to do, yada, yada, yada. And they are great. I have had, I would say, a nice percentage, especially of young men who are having a terrible struggle with porn habit, give up and take on I have had a substantial amount of students that deleted social media. Began to realize that it was occupying every bit of extra space in their lives, that it was dictating their lives. It was the first thing they looked at, the last thing they saw at night. If they couldn't sleep, they scrolled themselves to sleep. And I think you all have probably heard of the terrible sleep deprivation of this generation. I urged them to buy alarm clocks. I urged them to do something else at night, to go to sleep. They'll sleep better. They just began to realize it was an invader that had taken them over. And then not to mention the values and the anxiety. And I myself, and I have to course I have to do a substantial amount of work, but it does hook you. Not the phone so much for me, it's for the computer. But I said to them, what do you think we did when I was a kid? I said, I owned old cars, and I said, we'd go off, to 500 miles, especially if you were in love with somebody or thought you were. You'd go off in an old car and without anything but phones on a corner. And I said, if you die, you die. It was your time. You got a chance. There's no need for trust anymore. I had a student tell me today that her parents practically have threatened to disown her unless she leaves what is that called? The locator?
Oh, the Life 360?
Yeah. They want to know where she is at all times, and she's 20 years old.
Wow.
They have threatened her with it. They make a big thing out of it. So our addiction to safety, first of all, my parents were in the mission field. We didn't have phones. They didn't have phones. We were never in touch that way. That's one of the good things today. If you have missionary parents and you can FaceTime, I would say they don't need phones. The other thing is they never know where they are in the city. The only way I know my way around, if you couldn't surprise me with anywhere in Chicago, they use it so much for directions that they have never have any idea where they are. They can never tell me where the place was that they're talking about.
We took a bunch of youth group kids, this is years ago, to a big city, and we had them do a scavenger hunt. And it was basically having them navigate around to different monuments and landmarks within the city and then, answer a puzzle or something like that. But they weren't allowed to use their phones. We gave them a paper map in order to navigate, and the looks of impossibility that came across their faces. And even after a few hours of it, I can't say any of them were really very good at it,
Well, we not
We not only gave them a map, we took them to State and Madison and explained how Chicago works and how the grid system works and what's east and west and north and south. So like we started them at 0, and we're like, there you go. And it was crazy.
It's crazy because if something goes wrong with your phone, then what happens? And there's so much adventure that goes missing too. You guys have really good ideas. I don't know why you're interviewing me.
Well, you're too kind. Thank you. You know, there's something about the idea of the technology imprisoning us, and we're no longer able to see the bars on the window, so to speak. And it's something along the ideas of, look, it's great if you can, take a psycho and you put them in a prison and they know that they're in a prison. They know they can't escape. They know they can't get out. It's a different thing entirely to like geld an entire society, the youth of it, when adventure and the spirit of adventure should be the thing that's really, really driving them and pushing them forward. And they don't have a spirit of adventure. They don't have curiosity. They've been gelded and there are no bars on the window. There is no fence penning them into the pasture. They'll just sit in one place and not even move, thinking that the idea, once again, safety is better. This whole idea of you have to wrap your kids in bubble wrap before they even go outside because, a car could hit them or a kidnapper could get them or, something aliens. Like, it's gotten so absurd.
And there's a lot written about it. We don't have any excuse.
I can't believe that we're the ones that allowed it, though. That's the problem. The dumber the thing you could do when I was a kid, we jumped ramps with bicycles without helmets, without anything. It wasn't a successful summer vacation day unless I ended it, sitting on the toilet with mom spraying Bactine on my knees, and on my elbows. Like, that was how you really had a good day. And now kids today don't even know what Bactine is.
I know. Or leaping off bridges, or leaping down steps, or taking your bike. Your parents let you out the door, and you went and did it, and then you came home for dinner.
Completely feral.
It's something. So my oldest is 24. So we weren't quite having kids when the tech stuff, but there was enough. There was at least DVD players in the cars and stuff like that. But I got a lot of pushback from other parents and their peers to have, and I don't even think these are that strict. You weren't allowed to have a phone till you were 16. You weren't allowed to have social media until you were a freshman in high school. There was just this kind of, maybe it was 13 for the phone because they had to be a freshman. Anyway, it doesn't matter. They had to work.
That's moderate.
It's very moderate. But a lot of parents, even such things as that we ate at meal times. Like, there was a kid that came over and go, we don't do that. We just eat whenever we want. Like, we just go to the cupboard. And the whole family was obese. And I mean, I'm not trying to be mean, but it was kind of like, well, that's probably not working. So you need to change that.
No.
Yeah. We've just got a lot of flack for it. There's just certain things, just even following basic, I don't know. There was a rule here that you couldn't drive. Am I echoing or is it you? Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Of parents. I can't tell you how many, and there obviously are exceptions to that. I can't tell you how many of my parents, students, whose parents are involved in the church, never eat a meal together, and they long for it. Their parents just go out and buy a bunch of stuff in the refrigerator, stick it in the refrigerator. They don't sit down. They never, and if they do, like Thanksgiving, Christmas, there is no grace. There is no, my siblings and I still, when we get together at Christmas, sit down twice. It's one of the beautiful things I remember. I mean, we have destroyed, a family is not a family that doesn't sit down. And that's one of the units. In fact, I'm looking at an article here. What family gain at the dinner table? First of all, as I say to women's groups sometimes, I'm single. I get not to cook a supper. You don't get to do that. And this is something where you guard and you nurture your children and you bring them together and you preserve it. But my students talk all the time about their father walks off to an office, their mother goes up. The only way they get together with their family or their siblings is by watching a series or by communicating over a game. And the church is not doing what it's supposed to be doing and prophesying about this because it is eating our heart out. We're trying to lead kids to Jesus without showing them who he is at our dinner table.
Ouch. Yeah.
I feel powerfully about it. And I don't care about pushback. You know what pushback means? You're probably doing, they have just joined it. Parents are intimidated by their children.
Yes. It's embarrassing. It's embarrassing to watch. I've seen now, this would be parents now with younger children. I've seen it in public begging their child to not hit them. Like, just please. No, yeah. My kids are always like, well, that ain't how it was at our house.
And the child, it's so bad for the child. It's so bad for the child. And the weakness of it, I just despair sometimes when I see the parenting in big box stores. Sometimes I don't want to even go in there. And then always giving a child a screen to quiet them. When I see parents giving children screens in church, I can hardly believe it. And they're playing games in church. When you should be sitting there and learning the power of sacred space, of silence, of good behavior. And I also see wonderful children that are singing the songs and opening their Bible, so it doesn't always go wrong. But the fact that the pastor does not preach more about the family and technology and the terrible cost of this and how parents must model for children what it's supposed to be like. I have to tell you, I have many students that I want to do it better. Children, you form your children's lives. You owe it to them. You can't waste any time. And it is hard work. I can't imagine anything harder than raising toddlers.
Raising teenagers. I thought I'd just throw that out there. Yeah. I just sent my last one off to college last week. And so I was like, wow, that was really hard. Am I done yet? No.
It is hard. It is hard. And I have real big respect for that. I probably would have had children that were serial killers if I'd had any. But I take other kids that are a mess and I try to talk them through it. And the disappointment comes to kids because of their parents' involvement in technology are substantial.
You've used the term sacred spaces a number of times, and I think that it's very easy for somebody listening to go, oh, well, obviously that's church, right? That's the sacred space that I have in my life. But yet you keep hitting on the dinner table. You keep hitting on family time. You keep hitting on that intimate time that a husband and wife might have just at the end of the day alone in their bedroom. And I don't mean, hugging and kissing. I mean, just having that time to connect. This seems to me about what you're talking about. It's that we're made in God's image, and the ability for humans to connect with other humans, especially with family, especially with children, especially as husband and wife, that this technology is just so pervasive and invasive. It's interrupting the God-ordained design of how we're supposed to be in the world.
We're supposed to raise boys. How we raise girls. I mean, we invest in them. We form them. We teach. We are involved. Nothing about it is easy. Nothing about it is. It's constant. It's absolutely constant. And that's the design. And that's what causes this beauty then in midlife when your children come back and they raise good children, and it goes on. And the sadness I feel, because I said to the student today that was talking to me about her parents and how they just pound her with this basic stuff. I said, my parents did not have an uncomplicated marriage. There were rough things there. They loved each other very much, and they were great missionaries. They did something, made us all catch a love for the Lord. And I think a lot of it must have been the enormous amount of time they spent with us, the way they played with us, the way they paid attention to us, the way they provided. I've seen perfect marriages whose children do not emerge that way. One of my great concerns is how do we get our children to see Jesus as a dimensional person who's worth obeying?
I was going to jump on that for a second, because I think my thing I harp on all the time on the show is I have felt this way largely even since my days at Moody, that I was viewed as an oddity in my intense focus on theology, like that I wanted to think about things, I wanted to learn things, and I wanted to talk about things. And finding people who didn't think that was a little bit over the top has been a rare thing in the last 30 years of my life. But I'm seeing in the church that people don't have anything to stand on. They have no understanding of anything near what Paul is talking about. I mean, when I start talking about things like that, they're like, well, that's an academic, professor level or what. It's not. That's how Paul wrote. We don't love the word. We don't think about it deeply. We don't show that then to our children, because I think it's like you're saying that there has to be something that they see in you that makes them catch that flame. And I think that's huge to me. Huge is to find people who care about theology. I can count on 1.5 hands how many I found.
I've spoken to women's groups most of my life. I don't so much anymore because I'm old. You age out of those things. But in the book that I wrote, I have the thing about everything is theological and women as theologians. Everybody is a theologian. I always talk about how there are times when I've had to go to retreats and people, I have to disguise the nature of my talk with a cutesy title, get them in there so I can say what I want to say.
I love that.
Because they're off by, you have to kind of be, you really kind of tell a lie. You have to be, God, you can't, I've even had people say to me, well, I'm not sure the women will respond to that. But should the women, and they do, once you compel them, you can't have these silly little Bible studies. These questions are so dumb, nobody'd ever want to answer it. You can't have this where the food's more interesting than what's going on. It's not just your opinion. You have to read well. You can't get stuck on Hallmark and Amish romance, put a bonnet on it. You've got to read. You've got to be a person with character and dignity, and you will find yourself far more interested in life. And I have seen women come alive with that. Much better with women now. A lot of women do theology, and they do it seriously, and I'm very happy about it. But in the church, I'm afraid that the Bible study thing is sometimes not. I used to joke I'd never go to a retreat I wasn't speaking at, and I wasn't being arrogant by that. That it's intolerable. So many things are silly. And honestly, it's not just women. It's across the board. We're afraid of some of these words when theology is what the Bible is all about. It's the study of God. And the more you get in deep, the more you look at the narrative structure. It's not academic. It's alive. So anyway, I'm going on and on here.
Well, I noticed that one thing that we see is the idea of this like pop culture theology. And what I mean by that is that pick and choose any one of your favorite political commentators that might have an internet show or presence on YouTube or something, and they pepper in the word Jesus about 2 or 3 times during an episode, and they pepper in the word Christian or Christianity 2 or 3 times or something to that effect, and then the viewer walks away with the impression that they've gotten full, they've gotten theology, or they've been filled up somehow because this person's just like me. They believe in Jesus too. It's like, no. They believe in ratings. They believe in money. They believe in the great contract. They believe in politics. That's where their faith is. They mention Jesus once or twice, but that's definitely not the focus of their life. And you can even see that just by the fruit of kind of what comes out of it. And by that, I mean the fruit of the person that's participating by being that viewer. What's going on in their life? You're not seeing fruit out of them. And you see kind of what I'm saying? So it's
lack of thoughtfulness.
It's this new kind of synthetic. You feel like you know Jesus better because someone you like on the internet said his name twice.
Yeah, no. It isn't going to work, You have to, teaching Images of Christ in the novel, which I haven't taught for quite a while. I might be my last semester. I'm not absolutely sure, so I decided to come back to it. But I went in with a new urgency today, and I said, you got one life to live. And I said, you've got to know who Jesus is. And I said, he's not, you'll remember this, Laura. He's not the guy walking around with a towel over his arm, with smoldering eyes and really good hair. He's the real deal, And the story, and we're very Pauline in the church. We don't even preach the gospel quite as dimensionally as we could. And your entire life will be guided by what you believe, know, and have studied about Christ. Or you will not obey, and it will not matter because there is everything there to distract. So
I know I had one question Todd had circled because we want to make sure we hit this. Are there any redemptive qualities of technology in education, or is it all downside in your view?
And I looked at it, and if I were to tell the truth, or without it, except for medical issues, which I had open heart surgery in 2009. I just actually was in the hospital over the weekend. I'm glad for an instance of dizziness, but I'm glad for what technology has done for health. I'm glad for what it's done. I think about industry. I think about lots of things. Of course, we haven't even dealt with AI and how it's going to take over the world. And I'm really happy about technology in spreading the gospel to nations that will receive it in no other way. But Jesus had nothing, and the gospel spread and was responsible for the greatest music, the greatest. Malcolm Muggeridge has a wonderful talk about that. We have elevated it beyond its proportion. I think it has stolen more than it has given.
Wow, that actually
That sums it up well.
Yeah, it really does. I've been anti-robot for decades. I'm not trying to jump on the bandwagon here. It's not like I haven't seen many of the dangers of technology, whether it's moving up, not just in cell phones, but whether it's the synthetification of food. I don't think that's a real word. I just invented it. It's mine.
Right.
Yeah, it's not even real food anymore. Whether it's farming techniques, not doing crop rotation and stuff that people have been doing for thousands of years. Now we're talking about doing 3D printed meat or quote unquote lab grown meat as though that's a legitimate thing. So it's not just the cell phones. It's pervasive in so many aspects of life. But what I've come to understand, and it's funny because I have this way of trying to say something. I said, people don't realize the future is now because back in the 80s, the future, the George Jetson future, it was this gleaming white mirrored city. There was no pollution and the skies were blue. It wasn't the gas station built in 1975 that has fiber optic cables in it. We're not conditioned to recognize that the future is now. It just looks like 1970, 1980, 2005. So when I think of the idea of cyborgs, when I think of the idea of this transhuman future that so many psycho tech giant billionaires are trying to push us toward, it's easy to go, well, they don't really exist. We don't have brain chips in everybody yet. We don't have, eye implants. We don't have robotic arms and, pervasively, that kind of thing. And it's like, no. Your cell phone is your cyber interface with the cyber world. You are already an android or a half synthetic person, because if you're ignoring the real world in your real life now, you're not able to form actual relationships with real people. You can only do it online through that synthetic interface. Congratulations, man. You're already a biroid,
Boy, that's really interesting. Yeah, I that's very well said. I wouldn't be able to do that. I'm not that bright about things. But yes, that's very well said. Yeah.
I think that there's this collision that's happening where we're having this future that too many people that are godless are racing to build because they're going to build humanity in their own image. And then we have the church who's, for lack of a better way to put it, at a minimum, maybe we're not supposed to be the vanguard of all society, but definitely shepherds for the flock inside the doors that these pastors have taken on and voluntarily taken on that responsibility, called or not. They still accepted the role. And there are too many places where they're just falling short. And I'm not trying to be a jerk. I mean, but for crying out loud, you've been teaching for 50 years and you know more about technology than a 35-year-old youth pastor who hasn't even addressed the issue once, with the exception of maybe saying under his breath, don't look at porn, guys.
It's pretty much about all that gets addressed.
I know. It's like, what is going on, man? And then I'm the jerk, right?
Just say no, right? That's like, just say no.
Exactly.
Well, we won't go on. We did an episode a couple, months ago on pornography, and it didn't do well.
Or least watched. Yeah, or least watched, least interacted with.
Apparently, I'm too comfortable saying the word, and that totally drove our numbers down or something.
Because they're intimidated. I mean, I had one of the responses, it's probably the program's almost over, but one of the responses I got from a student who wasn't in my class, he said, I could understand all the rules, but I couldn't understand the music issue, and I decided to do it. Music had been drowning out the problems that led to his pornography habit. And when he stopped listening to music, he was able to begin working on his porn habit.
And my big thing with porn is that nobody's talking about it. Nobody's talking about it with their children and talking about it regularly. I got told at one point that my child had probably interacted with it because I talked too much about it ahead of time. And
for heaven.
No, I was like, no, the answer is that at least he felt like it was something I knew. They eventually would talk about it with me. It is something that I thought for a while would be the only thing we ever talked about. And I have 3 boys, so I felt like I was talking about porn all the time. I felt like I should get a T-shirt, or something.
About porn.
Yeah, ask me about porn. I'm happy to tell. And a lot of women would say to me, I'm glad I never asked my kids. I don't want to know. And I thought, yeah.
You know what kids say about parents like that? I have had my boys say that they have asked their fathers to hold them accountable, and their fathers do not.
Wow.
I have had students tell me that they have begged for help, and I won't even tell. It would be too obscene to say what some of the fathers have said to their parents, to their kids. I've had kids go to their parents, Christian parents, and say, "I've slept with my girlfriend. I want to stop." And the answers are horrific. There's no accountability. There's no sense of them asking questions. There's no checking of their time. I have no idea when parents abdicated their responsibility.
I don't either.
Lied to my mother without her knowing.
I have a friend of mine, and I was talking with him, I don't know, a few weeks ago, and I wasn't trying to lecture him or anything, but I was just saying it's actually a result of having the porn conversation with Laura and recognizing certain patterns of what to do, that kind of thing. And anyways, he was saying to me, he goes, well, my kids know that they can come to me with anything. I said, they can come to you with only what you've let them know is acceptable topics within your home. So I'll give an example. They can come to you when they're hungry. They can come to you when they have a preference of tacos over pizza. They can come to you when they're not too sure what 2 + 3 equals. But if you've never talked about porn, you've never talked about sex, you've never talked about severe negative feelings and despair, if you've never talked about any of the real hard topics that lead kids, especially 12 and 13-year-olds, to make very, very terrible choices, whether that's a choice of a picture they never should have taken that got airdropped to their entire school, or whether that's a picture of them hurting themselves in a way that everybody wishes I wasn't talking about, but is a reality. Those kids never go to their parents about those topics because they were never open and allowed to discuss them in the first place. You want your kids to...
There's an invisible... They assume their parents are naive, and they want to be cared for. They want their souls addressed, even if it's hard. It's the manner in which it's done, of course, that is very significant. The parent has to do it not about themselves, but about the kid.
Well, that right there's the problem. I mean, how can a parent feel good about how they're parenting if it's not really about them?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, my oldest son has been married for a couple of years, and people say to me all the time, aren't you just anxious to be a grandmother? And I said, this is a discussion I have with my son and daughter-in-law. Once you have that child, it is game on for the rest of your life. You are never, ever, ever first again. That never goes away. And I said, they understand, they're both old souls. They understand exactly what it means to make that decision. And I'm certainly not going to pressure them to have children because it's not a blessing and a good thing, because it means very, very hard, intentional thinking for the rest of your life.
Well, you guys are good. You guys are.
Oh, I don't know. Don't ask me.
No. I can tell you did a lot of things right. Everybody does something wrong. I mean, yeah.
I know. Kelly is telling me that I should end on a positive note. Apparently, we're negative people. I don't understand. That's never been a thing for me. I don't know what she's saying. So she was asking, and I'm supposed to put this in a really, fancy way, but what would be kind of your advice for people if they're like, wow, I think I really need to change this, maybe just in their own lives. Well, parents is a whole other thing, but what would you suggest? Like, throw the phone in the ocean?
No, you can't do that. We need a phone for everything. I have to have it to, you have to have a computer to pay taxes, even if you're an old bat, and I don't know how people do it. I mean, I think you need to sit down and have a time of repentance before the Lord and ask His guidance. Don't do anything knee-jerk. And then the whole issue is not whether the phone gets the same thing in my generation. It was television. Does it rule you or do you rule it? What has it done? What is the downside? And then I think that John Mark Comer wrote a book called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. I know you know the book. It's very, very good. But I think they need to sit down as a family and talk about what healthy technology looks like. I think they need to institute a meal. Say they start with 1 meal a week, 2 meals a week, and then make it into maybe an evening meal. They need to start changing it in their lives before they talk to their parents and say, this is what or their kids, and this is what I've discovered. They need to set limits in the home and say, this is space where it's not going to happen. And it's going to be hard to implement. And they need to give themselves time and do it with great, great humility. And not with that, I've made this discovery now, so all life is going to change. So I think a fast is in order. Probably a family could agree to do a media fast, even if it's 24 hours, and see, just as an experiment, what they find out about them.
Well, and I think we have, three of us have had a discussion before because we're all, Todd and I are 50 plus and Kelly's catching up really fast. I did not grow up on it, and yet it has still got a grasp on my time. And some of it was, I was a single mom for 14 years, and the idea of not having a way for them to get a hold of me. And people are like, oh, no, they don't need you anymore. Well, my son was in a car accident yesterday, so it's kind of glad to have it at the same time. But yeah, it's got an addictive quality, even if it's just clearing notifications or whatnot. So it's interesting that if it has a grip on me, and I wasn't raised in it, it's got to be something that's gripping the next, the younger generation. But yeah, I think in the talk that you'd given as well at the women's conference, you had recommended attending church, shutting it off, or not just vibrate, but shutting it off, or taking 2 hours on a Sunday where you just don't have your phone, or some, small steps.
Say like the Catholics, they don't eat till they take communion. So can you not do computer at all to be home after church? Like a gift to God if this is a sacred morning.
So, Doctor, thank you very much for your time. How can folks that are listening, how can they get a hold of you? How can they find out and find your books that you've written? You've written so many books. You've given so many interviews. I thought I was looking on Moody's site, and I thought that there was a bunch of books that were there.
Oh, those are books that
well, that counts. That counts. Your name's on it.
I did not write Progress. I did not write the Confessions of St. Augustine. They can email me. I wrote one book, Unseduced and Unshaken. I like the book. It has 3 other authors in it. The role of dignity in women's lives, but it could apply to men too. And I think it's a good book. It uses a lot of literary illustrations throughout. I am on the web. I do, Chris Fabry interviews. I do this and that. There's even a talk on technology on the web, not with my face because I'm a non-video person, called something like, I can't even remember what it's called. It's something about thinking carefully about technology or something. The chapel talk. But I mean, I'm available to Moody website. So since I'm still there, and it's just derosset@moody.edu.
I know that it would be a technological thing, but I really wish you'd offer an online course for the old people like Kelly and I who'd love it.
I would love it.
And I'm just so bad about that stuff. I can't do it. I've been asked to do it before, and I just,
I know.
I can't do anything indirect. I have to see faces. That's why I do better speaking and teaching than I do even publishing. I write easily. I should have this book done. I've got the time. But I just am buzzed by people. So when I was a child, a heavily social child,
Yeah, that's like Kelly. She's so super.
That's very me.
I'm an indoor cat, as Todd would say. Like, I think, if people just stayed home and read some books, they wouldn't break their legs. They wouldn't get sick. Come on, people, just stay home. You'll be fine.
Yeah. So, but I'm not hard to find. I'm not a household word, but I'm not hard to find.
I think that's awesome. This whole entire conversation makes me think of Genesis 3:6. And when the woman saw that the fruit of the tree was good for food and pleasing to the eye, and also desirable for gaining wisdom, she took some and she ate from it. And the idea is that modern technology is pleasing and attractive with all of the promises of convenient solutions to modern day problems. It's always going to present itself as being helpful and good for gaining wisdom. But in the end, this ends up eroding our trust in God. It ends up damaging our relationships with the body, and even comes between husband and wife and parents and their children.
Exactly. So the issue is that we control it. We are very conscious of that it does not just become an appendage of our lives.
That we don't become that integrated cyborg, not realizing just how connected we actually are to our phones and dependent on them for that reaching out into the world when all we had to do was stick out our hand and shake somebody's hand in the first place.
Exactly.
Thank you very much for joining us. Dr. Rosalie de Rosset, thank you for your time today. We really do appreciate it. I'd love to have you back on. I would love to gripe about the world with you again and be like, this place drives me crazy, and all that kind of stuff. Thank you so much. We really do appreciate it, and we're looking forward to talking with you again soon.
It was a great pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. Thank you very much for joining us, and we'll talk at you next time. Hey, thanks for listening to Naughty versus Nice. If this episode hit home for you, or, got us stepped on your toes a little, but in a good way, go ahead and follow, and leave us a review. It helps us out way more than you could possibly know. We're on all the socials at Naughty versus Nice. That's VERSUS Nice. And if you believe in what it is that Laura and I are doing, you can definitely pop on over to patreon.com/naughty versus nice and give us a hand there as well. Thanks for walking this road with us as we have these conversations, talk about these wider concepts, and discuss what it means to be followers of Christ. We really appreciate you joining us, and we'll talk at you next time.